Howdy, everybody. Give everybody a few minutes to show up, or them that wants to show up to show up. We wanted to do this throughout the course of the off season, kind of just build on what we're doing in the season. I told you last time, if you were here, we're working on some ways to make your experience more interactive with me, meaning instead of just typing in questions, maybe we can get you in to the video, have some of you on as guests. We'll also have guests, from the industry and football guests in general in the mix here over time. Got to give it a few minutes before we get rolling to see if anyone's going to show up. I see somebody's there, and so great week of football last week. Perhaps the greatest week of football in my lifetime, which means since I've lived forever, the greatest football ever. Fantastic weekend. What a slate of games, all exciting, upsets, and more. Hey, JR, how's it going? Got a one and done question. We'll get into some of those. I'm having some issues. I need to set my lineups this week. Came up small in the wild card week and gained a lot of ground last week, but I might have to take some chances this week to remain in the running. And this may be what your question is about. And I'm looking at it, JR. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So we'll get into it. Welcome aboard. Hope more people join as we go along. And if you have questions, chime right in. I'll run through some information I have. There's been a lot going on this week, not to mention, coming off one of the greatest weekends of football in my memory, which means, again, ever. So the one and done question from JR is planning on playing Jimmy G this week and then saving Mahomes Burrow winner for the final week. I'm in ninth place, but looking at the rosters ahead of me. Want to play Burrow this week and gamble on Mahomes being there. This is exactly what I'm going to be doing, right? And I don't know yet, JR, which one I'm going to pick, but that's the boat I'm in, the exact same boat. I traveled down the NFC path to get me to the end, thinking I would get a Mahomes or a Burrow or a Josh Allen, in the final week and really make some hay. And it didn't work out that way, so I've left myself a decision. It's Garoppolo or I take a chance on the AFC game, and I'm going to probably do that. And I'm probably thinking the same way as you. And that's what you have to do, right? If you're playing in a one and done, you want to leave guys. You have to project the winners of the games. And if you're projecting the Chiefs are going to go on, obviously get your Burrow in now. This weekend's games are fantastic. But the Cincinnati-Kansas City game, you've got an over-under of 54.5. The Rams and 49ers, you got an over-under 46.5. Jimmy Garoppolo has not been a huge part of the scoring. Last time these two teams faced was Week 18, the Rams and 49ers. And Jimmy G did throw a touchdown. So did Deebo Samuel, right? And that's like, okay. So I'm kind of with you, JR. I think I would feel very similar to how you feel in this case. And I would take a chance. And I'm in worse place than ninth. So that maybe makes me a little more desperate. But I don't know how many people are in your tournament. And, I mean, you obviously need to gain some ground. So, yeah, you're probably going to have to do that. And I'm totally on board and totally get it. So we're starting out with Cincinnati at Kansas City this weekend. Wish they had flopped those around. Would like to be watching that game, to end the day. But it's not how. It doesn't seem like weather's going to be a huge issue. It'll be cold. It always is in Kansas City. But from what I've seen, cold is it, right? So hoping for that. Injury issues for both teams. Nothing major. Stanley Morgan listed as doubtful for the Cincinnati Bengals. Darrell Williams listed as questionable, but Andy Reid suggested he'd play. I don't know what I'd expect from him, right? It's been a few weeks since we've seen him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back, but mostly Jerick McKinnon has established himself as kind of a playmaking threat. And I know in my tournament plays, he's a slightly cheaper than Edwards-Helaire, and so I'm probably going to have him in some lineups, him being Jerick McKinnon. I outsnapped Edwards-Helaire back. It was Edwards-Helaire's first game back, right? And so, some of this could be dependent on game flow, but given that over-under, you look at the last time these teams met in Week 17, it was a 60-plus point output, so I'm expecting the scoring to be fast and furious. We're all hoping that. And look, I like, from a DFS perspective, it's a narrow band, right? It's not a large field. So I don't know that anyone's ruled out. There are some great values on the slate. If you want to ask about it, feel free. The pricier guys are great, and you can build some pretty strong lineups. If you need some cheap flexes or some cheap options available, they are certainly available as well. CJ Uzama being one of them. Tyler Higbee being fairly cheap. I think George Kittle. Do we want to miss out on the game where he finally explodes to life? I don't know. Deebo Samuel. There's reason to remain skeptical about him, except he keeps producing every damn week, right? He's doing it. It's almost like a Cordero Patterson feel earlier this season. Like, can he keep producing at this rate? He's not getting the huge workload. Deebo as a receiver, getting a lot of it as a ball carrier. Is that going to continue? And it just keeps continuing. So I think that's what we're counting on with Deebo. You're paying for him. You're paying for Cooper Kupp, obviously, so those high-priced guys, Jamar Chase, Jamar Chase is, I think, reasonably priced compared to those two, and so is T. Higgins, even more reasonably priced. I think $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings than Chase, for $1,600 cheaper on FanDuel. So, again, and there's always going to be the outliers, the Byron Pringles, Tyler Boyds in that game in particular. Mecole Hardman, I think, is viable. I'm not as keen on Demarcus Robinson, but obviously, at this point, especially in tournaments, if you're trying to differentiate, taking some dart tosses is fine. The late afternoon game, Cooper Kupp, the highest priced receiver. By the way, Joe Mixon, the highest priced running back on the slate. Again, I was a little down on him last week, and I think mostly that bore out, other than that huge drive to open the second half where he ended up scoring. It wasn't Joe Mixon's greatest game, but still, he's going to have a role in that offense. So, again, this week it's not the worst of matchups. If you're desperate, I don't know. I'm trying to decide on that, JR. It's kind of, that's what I'm debating right now. And I am desperate, and that's probably the direction I'm going to go. But I do think Kansas City's going to win, so do I really want a quarterback next week? That's the conundrum. Will it matter if I'm so far out of the running? I'd like to have a dog in both those fights, but I need to pick correctly. So that's kind of where I'm at. I chime in. I'm guessing you feel like it's going to be a Kansas City win. So, let me know what you think. Give me your predictions, JR. Hello, Andrea. 2 running back in tournament, Mixon, McKinnon, CEH, Cam Akers, Mitchell, and defense. So I'm kind of in on Mitchell this week. I think the Rams, the ground is where to attack them first and foremost. So I do think Mitchell's going to a solid play. You're going to have to pay for it. Not as keen on Akers. I love the workload last week. I guess I wonder, is coming off that lengthy layoff to have a, 24 carries. It was a huge day, and it took a pounding. Is he going to rebound nicely? He had the 2 fumbles as well. Sony Michel had 1 carry. Are they going to keep going with that as well? So I'm a little leery of Cam Akers. I like McKinnon an awful lot. I don't think you can go wrong with Mixon, but it's probably in the order I like them. Mitchell, including Price, Mitchell, McKinnon, Mixon. I like those 3 better than I like CEH and Akers. I just wonder if we're not going to see a little more Michel. I think in a cash game, I might be, I might be more interested in Akers there. In a tournament, probably not. I just wonder if Michel's not going to get opportunities to take the ceiling off or to lower it. Defenses. So I want to pay, I think to me, Kansas City's an obvious choice. You look at all the sacks last week, the offensive line issues for the Bengals, they're ongoing. They didn't cost them as dearly as it could have last week, but you're looking for opportunities at playmaking and getting something done. I think there's a good argument for Kansas City. I think there's also a really good argument for Los Angeles, though. So if I had to pick, it'd probably be Los Angeles. Jimmy Garoppolo, known to throw interceptions at key times. This is kind of one of the reasons I like Elijah Mitchell, though. Are they going to really focus on the ground game and try and, look, I know Jimmy Garoppolo does nothing but win, but they can help him do nothing but win, right? And by, not asking him to do things that he's struggled with in the past. And look, like we saw the offense, even against Green Bay, it just wasn't fantastic. That's what offense isn't what won them that game. It was their special teams and the play on defense. So I might, those are the 2 I'm focused on, Andrea. JR thinks KC will win, but if I was in the middle of the pack, I would assume my only chance the Bengals upset, which will leave many. Yeah, this is true. I'm thinking it through. I've still got a few hours left to decide. In that late afternoon game, the San Francisco at Los Angeles in SoFi, the Rams win and make the second straight Super Bowl where there's a home team. Interesting. Such a great home team that they were initially had Ticketmaster. You couldn't buy tickets if you didn't live in Los Angeles because they tend to get a diverse crowd there. And by diverse, I mean the other team's fans show up pretty good, especially if it's a Bay Area team would probably be likely to show up well. So interesting anyway. It's a good game, a little lower over under. I think the Rams, we saw Matt Stafford last week. By the way, talk Cam Akers. I mean, I'm not put off by the fact he only got 2 yards of carry against the Buccaneers. I mean, that's not – and I love the workload. I just, I have concerns. Is that workload sustainable coming off a 6-month-plus layoff, just back 2 weeks? So those are my concerns. And Sony Michel's a viable play. So love that game. The injury issues are not really great there either. Van Jefferson is questionable. Has been dealing with a knee issue. My guess is he'll play, and he would be another guy on my, DFS start toss radar. Obviously a capable playmaker, lower priced. Tyler Higbee, I like because he's cheaper, and he's had a pretty significant role. But I'd probably go a little cheaper and go Uzama myself. But that's where I have. And then on the San Francisco side of the ball, I think I'm not interested much in playing Jimmy Garoppolo. But beyond that, I'm fine playing any of the starters. And by that, I mean, Deebo Samuel, fine. Not on the injury report, by the way, so that's good news. Fine playing Brandon Ayuk as a lower priced option. George Kittle, you're paying up for it, and the production hasn't been great. But I keep thinking, the explosion, the course correction is going to come, right, at some point. So that's worth noting and worth playing, I think, if you're interested in that. Travis Kelce, obviously the most expensive play on the board for the obvious reason. I don't think you can go wrong with that in cash games. I think there's ways to build some pretty good cash lineups without that. So we'll get into that, Matthew. Some of the rumors going with the coaching changes. I just wanted to finish covering these games first. I'm hoping we have another fantastic weekend of NFL football, 2 games at least worth of fantastic football. Because, man, last week was just off the hook great. Loved it. That Chiefs-Buffalo game. Good Lord. And so that gets us to start moving ahead. We had 3 coaching hires this week. Those are a big deal for me this time of year. Their teams are taking their time a little bit. We started out. We broke the proverbial dam there. Earlier in the week, the Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach. And by the way, I should touch on this because we haven't talked about this since the last time we met. But the Sean Payton retired from the Saints, and I think that's going to be an interesting situation as well. I don't necessarily blame him for retiring. It seems like a good timing. You don't necessarily have a quarterback there. A lot of questions with some of the personnel, and I think it's going to leave some big questions for the top skill players coming back. And so I talked to John Hendricks from SI.com this past week about some of those players. Alvin Kamara, obviously he's going to have a role no matter who the coach is. And one of the possibilities for the coaching change there is Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, really sharp guy. They'll talk to other people. Brian Flores is interviewing. But interested to see what kind of offensive minds they get in there. Pete Carmichael has been, Sean Payton assistant on the offensive side of the ball. If Dennis Allen stays, you would think there's a good chance of Carmichael being retained and maybe retaining that offense. But we don't know about the quarterback. It's wide open. Taysom Hill had foot surgery, Liz Frank injury, and his future is up in the air, right? So Ian Book, didn't like what we saw of him, did we? So it was a brief look, but he just doesn't look like he's got it. And I don't think Trevor Siemian's the answer going forward. So the Saints may be one of those teams in the market for free agents. And that is something, by the way, we're going to get into in coming weeks, big time, the free agent market. There's some great free agent plays out there, and there's going to be some things. So so the Broncos hire Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach, which brings us back to Matthew Whitfield's question. Aaron and Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams to Denver, right? So Aaron Rodgers has many times. Last year, I think he called the Falcons and told them they needed to hire Nathaniel Hackett. So obviously a big fan of Nathaniel Hackett. Rodgers said he's not interested in a rebuild. That would mean the Packers have to do something right by Davante Adams, who reportedly wants $30 million a year. Don't know if he's going to get that, but a 3-year, $80 million deal seems like what a lot of people are reporting would be a reasonable estimate, somewhere up in that range, and the Packers would be wise to lock him up and probably extend Rodgers. But short of that, I mean, we're going to hear this, the Rodgers and Davante to Denver. I mean, that was a team Aaron Rodgers reportedly was interested in. His fiance has a home in that area and, all the associated things that go with that. But but is it realistic to expect these guys to show up as a package deal somewhere? That's going to be tough for a team to pull off, right? Unless people are really willing to do cap-friendly deals, at least initially. Remember, Denver just invested and extended Tim Patrick and didn't, and Cortland Sutton with significant amounts of money committed to both. Jerry Jeudy's still on his rookie deal, so that's not a big deal. But they obviously felt they were loaded wide receiver. George Payton, the current GM, who is out there hiring Nathaniel Hackett, is the same guy who did those deals with those wide receivers. So not to say it's not going to happen, but I still think, I'm where I was last year. I mean, and maybe it's dialed back to 85, but I've been saying since the season ended, I'm 90% Aaron Rodgers is back with the Packers, which if you guys remember last year, or if you listen to me on the radio, I've been talking about that all year. Yeah, they have a lot of money under the cap, but I mean, that's two pretty expensive players, right? And I'm sure they could juggle things around to make it work. Just saying, they've invested a lot of money, Matthew, in the wide receiver position. Obviously, things change. I get it, but, and maybe we can speak this into existence. It's obviously something that's out there, and, it's out there for a reason. I know Jordan Schultz from ESPN Insider, and I think for the NFL Game Day, put out that, he's hearing that that's what they both want to do. So we'll see. Adams has also been connected to the Raiders. We'll see what their coaching search leads to with Josh McDaniels. Sounds like he's, they're interested in each other. Certainly the Raiders are interested in him. Sounds like as of this morning, he's got to see, it's almost as much as he's interviewing them as they are interviewing him. So he's been picky in the past, right? We thought he had to deal with the Colts and then he didn't. So we'll see. But there's been an obvious connection between Adams and Derek Carr because they played together in college and they had some chemistry there, clearly. We'll see. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying there would be a lot of hurdles to overcome. George Payton said yesterday, absolutely, that aspect of the situation had nothing to do with the hiring of the coach. And if you've been around a little bit and heard what people have said about Nathaniel Hackett, that is probably true. He's a high energy guy, really good at keeping the players' attention, communicating with players. A younger guy, 42 years old. So we'll see. I mean, look, I'm open to anything, but some of these things that when the rumors start right away. I mean, I was slow to get on they're hiring. They're going to hire Cliff Kingsbury because they got Kyler Murray thing in Arizona. And there's how it turned out, right? That connection. So. I'm not dismissive of it totally, but there's a lot of things to overcome to get there. And maybe they do. A lot of time to go. I still, for the record, I'm going to say Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are both back in Green Bay until I have a really good reason not to. One of the things, if you saw it out there, I know Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk threw it out there. One way to make sure this happens is to, extend Rodgers right now, give him a really cap-friendly deal, but with a lot of money and a lot of guaranteed money. And then get Adams' deal done. And those are going to be factors, right? I mean, how the Packers treat, Davante Adams and his situation is Aaron Rodgers is paying attention. There's no doubt about that. And that could be the defining thing. So those are my thoughts, Matthew. We'll see. But my leaning right now is no, and totally open to changing my mind if something happens to change it. And just to fit another one in here, JR still has Akers, Michelle, CH, McKinnon, and Pirine. These two this week and next week. Has Mixon as well. You're in ninth place. Seems like you need, I probably, I mean, you think you were picking the, you think KC will win. So, I mean, I'd go ahead and play Mixon this week if you have him. And I'd probably, maybe play McKinnon this week because that would still leave you CEH next week. It would leave you both the Rams back, I'm kind of thinking they're going to win. So that's the direction I'm going. But getting back to the coaching changes, after the Denver hire, the Chicago, they hired GM Ryan Poles, and he quickly landed Matt Eberflus. It sounded like it came down to him and Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is going to remain in Dallas. Interesting, the focus there seemed to be on a defensive coach, and Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator for the last few years, and has done a fantastic job with that defense, obviously, since he took over. He actually took over. He was set up as part of the staff when they hired Josh McDaniels, and then McDaniels backed out and they added Frank Reich, or went with Frank Reich as the head coach. Eberflus stayed. So, and has done a great job. So defensive-minded coach. So we're interested more in the offensive side of the ball. And the offensive coordinator is going to play a big role here because we're all interested in Justin Fields, right? So who that offensive coordinator is going to be a big deal. If you tune into the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio Football Diehards program tonight, 6 p.m. or 5 p.m., 5 to 7 Eastern time now. That's going to be our regular home on Saturday. Me and Dempsey will be doing that. And if you have been around for past seasons, we like to do deep dives into each division. Tonight it will be the NFC North. And so we'll have beat writers from the Packers to talk about that. Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Nagler will be on. We'll talk Bears with Zach Pearson from Bears Report. We'll talk Lions with Tim Twentyman from the Detroit Lions website. And who else do we have? I should probably have to look now. And make sure I don't screw it up, right? Who was the other guest? Courtney Cronin from ESPN to talk Minnesota Vikings, where they are going to hire a new coach. They just hired a GM. And so we'll see that's going to be an interesting situation there. Interesting to see. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is the new GM there. Will he go with an offensive-minded coach? Will he also go with a defensive coach? These are the things that we'll be finding out in short order. A lot of openings still out there. 3 filled, 6 to go now that the Saints opening is there. So a lot of pieces. Brian Daboll was the final head coaching hire this week. Sounded like Miami had a real chance, or he seemed to really like the situation there after his first interview. But ended up going with a more familiar situation to him, I guess, because Joe Shane, the GM that was hired there earlier in the week, or a week ago, I guess, was Brandon Beane's assistant in Buffalo, and so they're very familiar with each other. I think this is a great hire for the Giants. Daboll is, top 5 offenses in Buffalo each of the past 2 seasons. Really got Josh Allen, took him from being what we initially viewed him as, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn to one of the game's top quarterbacks, right? From a fantasy perspective, probably the top quarterback. So they're bringing him in. The Giants committed, pretty much committed in their press conference when they hired Shane that Daniel Jones is their guy. And so, it makes sense to bring in a offensive mind. And I think it's easy to understate what Brian Daboll did in Buffalo. We all heard the name and it's been floating around out there. And he's had success in past. He's been offensive coordinator with other teams and had success with other teams as well. So, but bringing him in here in this situation, look, they can focus on getting some offensive linemen. They've got playmakers in the backfield. Saquon Barkley, probably still a pretty good football player, I'm guessing. Kenny Golladay, we'll see if he can come on. But they do have some good weapons there. So they need to focus on the offensive line, get some pass protection for Daniel Jones, who can run, throw, do a lot of things. So he needs to get over his injury. But I thought this was a good hire. I was interested to see where Daboll went. Because I think if you follow the coverage closely of Buffalo each week, a lot of local observers commenting on the minor adjustments and the subtle changes to the offense week to week to the game plan that Daboll built in. And it'll be interesting to see what Buffalo does now. Ken Dorsey, former NFL quarterback, you may remember him, Miami quarterback, called University of Miami. Really smart guy. And Josh Allen loves him and has endorsed him as the replacement. Also, Brian Daboll needs an offensive coordinator, and there's been some talk that he wouldn't mind dragging Ken Dorsey along with him. So how much of a brain drain do we get in Buffalo is going to be a factor going forward. I think Josh Allen's still going to be really good, but that's something to watch, right? So I love the coaching change season because I think the coaches are the thing that I pay the most attention to every year because that's the repeatable thing. I think I've talked about this before, but when you're when you're from a fantasy perspective, when you're looking at a team, there are a lot of moving pieces. And even from also a team's perspective, right? You go into each week, it's a different opponent. The game plan changes, the travel or not traveling, how you approach all those things. There's changes in all aspects of football, right? So every week, that's part of the fun of football. Head coaches hate this, though. They want everything to be as much the same as they can, to the degree they can make it. So understanding what the coach's desired outcomes are does not always give you the outcome we're after, right? I mean, the players have to go out on the field and deliver on those desired outcomes, and they don't always do that. But it is helpful to have a baseline and understand the desired outcomes of coaches. And I think that's the starting point for me. It starts with the head coach, who has as much control over a group or a enterprise as anybody in the business world or the sports world. Complete control, essentially, once the season starts. And then the offensive coordinator, right? That's a big deal as well. And we've seen it over and over. So we'll see how these coaching moves, pan out in the coming weeks. Sounds like Miami will do something next week. And I'm sure the dominoes will start falling. The Raiders, again, sound like they're working on closing in on Josh McDaniel of the Patriots, along with a Patriots executive. The Houston Texans, I do look for. I agree with you, Andrew. I think the Giants will be better under Brian Daboll. I think this is a good move for the team. I don't know that Joe Judge, was as horrible as he made out to be, but he did not handle things fantastically. But he was not dealt a good hand, right? I mean, injuries, attrition. I think a lot of these guys, the Bill Belichick coaching tree, you come out and you try to do things Bill Belichick style, and that works great if you're Bill Belichick and you have this huge track record of success. It's a little harder to get people to buy into all that when you're not Bill Belichick and you don't have this history of success, right? I mean, you were associated with it, but you're not responsible for it. And we've seen it with Matt Patricia, most notably. And, to a degree, Josh McDaniel in Denver. I thought Brian Flores was doing a great job in Miami and building a culture and but he's not a people person, right? That seems to be the problem, is he doesn't get along well with others in his own organization, or that's the reporting. He doesn't get out there with the media, so he doesn't have allies in the media who are putting out his side of stories, etc. So, it doesn't work for everyone. It works for Bill Belichick, and it works for Bill Belichick because he's got a big-ass pile of Super Bowl trophies. And some of that has to do with Tom Brady. And by the way, yes, we're hearing Tom Brady. We've all heard him talk. Sounds like he's closer to retirement than returning at the moment. I think these things change. I think, expecting people to not to see their disappointment after a disappointing end of the season is not unusual. I think, giving it a little time is always wise in these cases, but it does seem like he's trending that way. So, Robert Ferenc, it's way too early, but what are your thoughts on the Lions' upcoming year with the division changing so much, especially if Rodgers changes teams? So I like what Dan Campbell is starting there. Can he build on that? I've been intrigued by him. You can go back to his time as interim coach in Miami, former player, tough, hard-nosed guy. We all saw the press conference, the introductory press conference, the kneecap biting and whatnot. Interesting that he took over the play calling midway through the year from Anthony Lynn, who is now gone, right? So, I think Dan Campbell's an interesting guy. And again, I pay a lot of attention to the coaches, the personnel. They've got to make some decisions on Jared Goff. I felt like he played well enough, as the season went on that, you could consider him a bridge. They need to find the next guy. I think they will win more games, right? If Aaron Rodgers goes, this whole division gets a makeover, right? We'll see what happens with the Vikings coaching change. But I do think the Lions are building something. Can they have the patience to stick with it? Like Miami did not. I thought Miami was building something. They didn't have the patience to stick with it. And Dan Campbell is not, Brian Flores. Dan Campbell's, much more gregarious and outgoing and willing to talk, and he's open about things. And so that might be interesting. But I thought the team showed a lot of toughness and did a really good job, with what he had. They've just got so much work to do on that roster, but they have some really good key skill players, whether it's TJ Hawkinson and Amon-Ra St. Brown came out and really established himself as a high-end player going forward. Obviously, the backfield is solid. DeAndre Swift needs to figure out how to stay healthy. So a lot to build on there. And yes, I think everybody in this division would be really happy if Aaron Rodgers went away. And yeah, JR, I think Kadarius Toney looked very good in limited time. He looks like he has a whole different set of speeds that other guys don't. And mostly that stop-start ability is remarkable. And I do look for the Giants to play better as well, Andrea. I agree with that. Jimmy Williams wants to know thoughts on who would be good as the Bears offensive coordinator and why. Well, I don't, I think a lot of people would be good. I think one of the names mentioned that I think would be good is Pep Hamilton, currently a Texans assistant, has been a Chargers assistant, has worked with some great quarterbacks, has shown, over the course of time. I think head coach was at Washington. And so look, Pep Hamilton is the first focus here, and I think he would be a great offensive coordinator just based on his past work with a variety of quarterbacks, even like last year's. Look where Davis Mills started and where he ended up, right? And the year before that, it was just why am I losing? The Chargers quarterback. Can't even think of a name, for crying out loud. But anyhow, I think he's done a good job of building good young quarterbacks. And I think that'd be a good choice. And that's the first name that was thrown out there that I heard. And maybe we'll hear others, right? But that would be a good starting point. I just think, I think there's things other than coaching that they need to do to work on that. First and foremost, offensive line. I do think Pep is a possibility, by the way, and so I think that's what you're asking about, Andrea. Is what about Chicago? I think that's that's the only name I've heard mentioned, right? And I think it would be a great choice. I'll know more next week. We'll probably all know more next week, but I'm definitely going to have, if you listen to the Diehards tonight on Sirius, it'll be coming in, and it's Justin Herbert is the quarterback I could not think of. Why, I don't know, because I love Justin Herbert. It's odd. But I think the key there in Chicago is, they've got to upgrade the offensive line. I think what we learned last year is offensive tackles matter a lot. They didn't have a lot of those in Chicago, or at least some healthy ones early on. So I do think that's going to be the key, the coordinator hire, and that is the name that's been most mentioned. So we'll see if that's how it plays out. I want to go back to Kadarius Toney. They do have, they have Evan Ingram still, who does not catch all the passes thrown his way, but is certainly, has the athleticism to. Yes, thank you, JR. It took me a minute to catch up on that. I don't know why. I love Justin Herbert. The players I love the most escape me. And that'll be an interesting team going forward. See what they do with Mike Williams. And I am going to talk in coming weeks. We're going to dive into the free agents by position. And so have your questions ready on that. It's interesting. The wide receiver class is really solid. The running backs, there are some interesting names on there, including Leonard Fournette. If Tom Brady goes, how are we going to feel about all those Bucs players? Are we maybe going to want Leonard Fournette to go somewhere else? If Tom Brady's back, I want Leonard Fournette back. I want everybody back. But even the Buccaneers have acknowledged that they're going to have a hard time. We're not going to see what we saw last year, where they were able to re-sign every single skill player, or every single starter for that matter. So, and they don't want every single skill player, says Antonio Brown. My Super Bowl winner, I'm going to go with the AFC side. And yeah, San Francisco's beaten them the last 6 games. I feel like that's like most the momentum has shifted so far that it's almost ensures a Rams win, right? It's hard to win 6 games in a row, 7 games in a row against any one team. So I'm probably going to go with the Rams here. I think they're just overall the better team, have the better quarterback. Maybe that's the better point to make. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm slogging on Jimmy G. He seems like a game manager type, but he's game managered the hell out of that team, right? Since he's been there, they win the games he plays in. They don't win the games that he's not. But I think, and then what happens in San Francisco? What is our conversation going to be if Jimmy Garoppolo leads that team to a Super Bowl, right? It's going to be hard to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo and move on to Trey Lance, which is clearly what they would like to do. I think maybe they would have liked to done it anyway. If you were around all season long, you heard me talking about this last summer. When people were drafting Trey Lance pretty highly, I just my view at the time was this team is built to win, and as long as they're winning and Jimmy Garoppolo is quarterback, they're within that. Elijah Mitchell, I don't think any of us expected him to take over as the number one running back, right? I didn't. I can assure you until he did, and even then, I can say don't want to slog on myself, but I was skeptical. I was not one of those people. I want to spend all my money on Elijah Mitchell, all my free agent bidding money, whereas other people around me, Mike Dempsey, most notably my Sirius co-host, was all in on that. And look, I get it, and I was willing to spend on him. I just don't want to spend anything because what do we know about San Francisco? Elijah Mitchell can become the starting running back and be a star. I mean, so could anybody there, it seems. Anybody not named Trey Sermon, apparently. So we'll see. But yeah, I do think it's going to be interesting. And I kind of said, I wish the Kansas City, Cincinnati game was the later game, the nightcap, so to speak, because I think it's going to be the more exciting game. But hell, who knows? The way we've seen is Robert pointed out. I mean, it's 6 or 8 wins. The last one, week 17, 18, week 18, an overtime game. So probably going to be a very exciting game as well. But both these teams have a lot of good components, and I tend to focus on the offensive skill players, but on the defensive side of the ball, obviously for both teams, there are a lot of players to like an awful lot, or not like, depending on who you're a fan of. So my winner, I'm going to go with Kansas City at this point. I had gone all season long. My preseason picks were Buffalo and Green Bay. And was feeling pretty good about Buffalo until last week. So I'm going to go with Kansas City, and I'm going to say Los Angeles, and I'll say Kansas City is the ultimate Super Bowl champion. Jimmy Williams would like me to pick one. Mostert, Wilson, Mitchell, Hasty, Sermon. Right now, I'll go with the incumbent because he played a lot better than I thought. I think it's going to be easy to sleep on Trey Sermon. Sometimes players take a little time to make the adjustment. Thought he was a great fit for this offense. Just could never get going, right? And, I mean, we saw him get hurt early on. Exactly. There you go, Jimmy Williams. 49ers probably draft another running back in the 4th round, and just as likely he ends up being the starter. That's just how we view San Francisco, right? I mean, it's just plug the guy in who has the right skill set, and it works really well, says Elijah Mitchell and Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. and pretty much everyone except Trey Sermon. I mean, they plug him in and away they go. So, and Trey Sermon might be that guy next year. Again, I go back to last season. Matt Wallman, my good friend, does the rookie scouting portfolio super high on Trey Sermon and thought he was a good fit. And maybe it's just, so here's a player that we've seen recently that kind of bears this out. Sometimes players take a little time to understand what's required of them. They've been in high school and in college. They come in and out of high school, and they're, 1% of the players in the nation are as good as them. They get into college, and maybe 20% of the players are as good as them. They get into pros, and everyone's as good as them. And what separates them then when they're in a pool with all similar talent, right? Everyone's within 5% of the talent levels. What separates them? It's, their ability to study and learn the offense and understand their role in the offense. It's their workout habits. It's their sleeping, eating, off-field things, the off-season workouts, the work they put in. And so it brings up a player that we saw come down the stretch who I've started hearing in August, this guy was starting to get it, that's the words. And it was Devin Singletary. And we didn't see it immediately, right? But we did start to see it down the stretch, and then really came into play in December, et cetera. A guy that not only just earned a role, but earned the lead role in an offense where they were just going haphazard. They were just kind of catch as catch can, right? So I think players can get it, and players can evolve and change. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. And we saw it just most recently with Devin Singletary. One of the best games of all time last week, definitely. Overtime rules, would I change them? And I'm so all over the place with this overtime rules thing. I mean, first and foremost, I'm old and mean-spirited, so I'm kind of like, stop the other team, right? That's how you win. I mean, I hate seeing a coin toss determine the outcome of a game, but the Bills had their chance, right? They just had to stop them. Bills had a chance before there was even overtime, right? Couldn't stop them in 13 seconds. It's maybe coaches need to learn to be a little more aggressive We're seeing that more aggressive of mindset with the analytics on the point afters and going for forced downs. I'm with you, Andrea. Did it happen all season long with Singletary is what she's saying. I agree. I had some cheap investments in him. But I think the rules, I understand in the emotion of the moment. And I was there. Damn it, I want to see another drive. I want Josh Allen to have a chance to have the football. Yes, I'm like John Madden. I'm very old. Well, getting very old. But that's kind of the mindset, right? And I think we see that on defense. We saw that at the end of the game. Both teams, they play it really safe on defense. The thing that got them in position to win the game is no longer the thing they do. And I get that as well. But I mean, I wish, at some point it seems you would start saying, man, you need to be a little more aggressive. Look, there's teams that, that pay the price for being aggressive too. The all-out blitzes and things like that. We saw that as well this past weekend. So I get it. I probably am not changing anything. If I did anything, I would say just make it a 10-minute quarter, right? Just a shortened, abbreviated quarter. I think I heard Kyle Brandt talk about it on Good Morning Football. He's pretty adamant about it. But I do think that's an answer. And I did know that it did seem like whoever won the coin toss, and it bummed me out that I didn't get to see more of that game. So I think that to me is the answer. It's just instead of that kind of semi-sudden death, just say, hey, we're playing a quarter, and maybe that adds a little more strategy to it and forces teams to maybe play defense a little bit differently, or maybe they should just play defense differently. So that's where I'm at. I'm not for wholesale rules changes, but I'm not against them either, especially after that disappointing outcome. JR16, how often do top 10 quarterbacks look very shaky in the beginning of their careers? I can't remember an eventual top 10 fantasy quarterback that looked like, say, Ian Book or even Sam Darnold at the first. No, I don't either. Although, Peyton Manning was horrible, threw a lot of interceptions. There's plenty of history there that, quarterbacks need time to develop. And in this day and age, they don't really get that time unless they're Daniel Jones. I think I wish we would be a little more patient with everything, right? But we just aren't. And the NFL is no different. There's not a lot of patience there. And we tend to move on from things because, man, it's we live in the moment, right? So, yeah, the prevent defense is a miserable, it prevents nothing. It prevents wins. I think that's the old joke, right? It prevents your team from winning. But no, I can't remember anyone who was Ian Book bad. And honestly, I mean, Sam Darnold started out reasonably well. It wasn't until that Patriots game where we heard him say he was seeing ghosts that we all soured on him. But he did say it, and it was a true statement. I mean, that's what it looked like. So I kind of get it. In his case, no, I don't think we see a lot of quarterbacks though. Ian Book bad, turn it around. I just, he didn't look like he belonged on the field, right? And so that was horrible. I'm trying to, I'm wondering what the Saints are going to do. They're going to have to be players in free agency. I think a handful of teams think, well, if Tom Brady moves on, the Buccaneers are going to have to be players in free agency. And I think a lot of these teams are not going to be looking at the Jameis Winston level free agents, right? The guys that are just going to be available. They're going to be making pushes for the Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilsons of the world. And we'll see where, we haven't talked a lot about Deshaun Watson because there's a lot of pieces to us, that have to be, figured out before we can figure out the football aspects of it in my mind. And I'm not really good at figuring out all the other parts of it, right? The off field, I mean, that's going to play out how it plays out. But in my estimation, I don't think anybody, let me rephrase that. I think somebody will be interested no matter what, because I think there is a gambler out there in the NFL, and his name is David Tepper, and he is the owner of the Carolina Panthers. He got rich by gambling, right? I mean, not literally gambling in Vegas, but in the markets. And he is not, to me, just doesn't strike me when you listen to him talk. Doesn't strike me as a guy that wants to be a 500 team. And I think, making a move for a Deshaun Watson type player is a huge gamble, especially not knowing the outcome of the off-field issues. But it seems like the kind of gamble that a David Tepper would make. So we'll see. Also, I mean, look, there's going to be a lot of interesting, there's going to be a lot of guys on the hot seat that maybe behave a little differently next year or approach the game differently. I'm looking at you, Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, they weren't happy with the way their season ended. And, we've heard varying reports about how the meeting with owner Bill Bedwell went. and probably not that great. And because like this time last year, like last August and July and June, we were talking, wow, the Cardinals are all in. They have been, they've pushed their chips in. They went out and got J.J. Watt. They realized Larry Fitzgerald was gone, and they went out and added an A.J. Green and all these, pieces that they put in place to try to make a push, right? Mostly on defense, more on defense, and they didn't get there, right? So I'm interested to see what happens in Denver. The Denver sale Andrea is asking about the team. Now that they have their coach in place, they're going to sell that franchise. There are different groups. One has John Elway in it. One has Peyton Manning in it. I'm interested to see. I think Peyton Manning being involved in the league beyond just doing Monday Night Football with his brother would be great. And I think he'll get there, but this is going to be, I don't know if this is going to be quite that opportunity. So we'll see. I think for now, George Payton is installed, and the football end of things is going to be what it is. And unless we get maybe the ownership, if it was Peyton Manning, would have some influence on, their ability to access talent like maybe Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. So that's something we'll be watching, though. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. And there are a couple other, situations that I'm curious about. Just Steelers quarterback will be one of them. I wouldn't rule them out of the running for one of those bigger names that we talked about. Aaron Rodgers, not Deshaun Watson, but Russell Wilson. We'll have to see what Derek Carr's future is in Vegas as well. I'm not putting him in that same category, but there are going to be some pieces out there maybe that we didn't expect to be out there. So I think the Steelers might surprise us. They're talking that, Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins will compete right now, and that's pretty uninspiring to us as fantasy managers. So, or maybe my thoughts that they might make a big move, a big splash play would be more self-serving than than realistic, but something I'm open to looking for sure. But by the way, some of the coaching hires to come, we've heard, in Jacksonville, Byron Leftwich sounded like it was all but a done deal, and then it sounded like he wanted Trent Baalke fired. Well, he can get in line because every Jaguars fan would like Trent Baalke fired, and pretty much everyone except Shad Khan apparently would like Trent Baalke fired. I was hearing this morning on Good Morning Football, they're saying, that Trent Baalke's in the room, and Shad Khan asked, what changes do you want to make? And, he thinks all of these coaches would probably prefer not to work with Trent Baalke. And that sounds like the case with Byron Leftwich is what the holdup is there. He'd like to work with Adrian Wilson, who he worked with in Arizona as his personnel man. And so, if you're followed along the whole Jacksonville situation with everyone showing up at the game in clown costumes, or you've seen that and didn't know what it was all about, it's all about Trent Baalke. So we'll see what goes on there. But the Houston coaching situation, Josh McCown, no coaching experience, a lot of playing experience, currently the favorite to get that job. Is that a dysfunctional thing? A lot of, conspiracy theories out there involving Jack Easterby, who the executive who has the owner's, Cal McNair's ear, apparently, and they do a lot of weird things there. And Nick Caserio, the GM, the Easterby and Caserio both coming from the New England, tree. So did Bill O'Brien, for that matter. By the way, Bill O'Brien talked about as a possible coordinator again in New England if Josh McDaniels moves on. So, so many moving pieces left to go. I'm going to wrap this one up. If you have any more questions, we're going to come back and we're going to address those things. Obviously, we'll talk about, the coming Super Bowl next week and some issues there. But pretty quickly, I want to start getting into the free agent classes, and maybe we'll do that a position a week in coming weeks, and get your thoughts on that and have any questions ready for those, and more of the coaching situations. We'll have some more clarity on those. Seems like once the dominoes start falling, they all fall pretty quickly. But Miami, maybe the next, we'll see. Houston, Miami sound like they're closing in. Jacksonville sounds like they're closing in. New Orleans might take a little time. I still think Dennis Allen's the favorite there, but still a lot of work to be done. The Raiders, and so a lot of moving pieces to go out there before we get to some final. Just looking as news is coming in, but it's not really interesting news, I don't think. Let's look. Not really. Plenty of things going on. So anyhow, And again, if you're just, if you haven't been joining in, I'm looking forward to free agent discussions as well. I'm going to start laying all the groundwork for that. I've got my list. Also, what I'm going to do, I've made my 2 early top 10 rankings at each position. Maybe we'll do that next week between the Super Bowl or something, just to get that ball rolling and get people to start thinking, because that's something. Best ball rooms will be open soon. Stay warm, JR. If anyone on the East Coast, a big storm's coming. But a lot coming up every week, and really enjoy sitting around. And again, if you haven't been, if you missed out at the beginning, we are working on ways to get you more interactively involved, whether that's, in the video or sending clips, your questions in clips, or joining me live, getting guests involved as well. We'll be doing some of that. And I know that, I think that's going to be the goal here, is to get this to be more interactive. I'm going to keep doing Saturdays. I think that's something we'd like to establish. I don't know that it'll be every single Saturday. I might want some time off on occasion, but maybe we'll work something out and have someone else sit in for me on those times or whatever. But yeah, that's the plan. I'm going to keep doing it on Saturdays. If you like other days, or if there's times that you think are better, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm open and interested in hearing, your feedback. I want this to be a more interactive setting, right? I mean, I like sitting here talking, obviously, but I like, the questions, but I'd like to do more than just sit here and read your questions and answer them like that. I'd like to, thanks, Andrea. I appreciate you coming every week. I'd like to be a little more interactive and have some actual conversations. And, the more people we can bring into that, I think the more enjoyable it is for everybody, especially on that side. Just sitting here watching someone do a monologue is okay and can be informative. But I think when you get the interactive discussions going on is when it starts getting really useful. So there we have it. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'll see you next week. Enjoy the games. Let's hope Sunday matches last Sunday or Saturday or whatever.